The MCAT CARS podcast, session number 23. The CARS section of the MCAT gives thousands of pre-meds nightmares every night. Whether you're an ESL student, lack confidence while reading, or a slow reader like me, Jack Westin and the medical school headquarters are here to help you score higher in every section so you can be confident you're ready to get the MCAT score of your dreams. And welcome back to the MCAT CARS podcast. Thank you for taking the time to join us today. My name is Dr. Ryan Gray, your host here every week. If you are a pre-med, go check out all of the other podcasts that we have to offer at mededmedia.com. As always, I'm joined by Jack Westin, the premier MCAT CARS tutor online, and we have a great article about charm and charisma and much more. So let's go ahead and jump in and say hello to Jack. Jack Westin back for some more MCAT CARS podcast. How are you doing today?
Great. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm excited. Last week, we learned all about the Cavendish banana, and I threw off a waitress when I asked for a Cavendish banana, and she was like, I don't think we have that on the menu. I'm like, oh, trust me, you do. But that's all right. I will continue to use my newfound knowledge in weird and mysterious ways.
Yeah. Hey, we now know what Cavendish are, right?
Yeah.
So
all that matters.
That's a benefit of reading CARS passages.
It's reading in general. Knowledge gives you awesome information.
Yeah. The next week's passage I'm excited for as well. It's going to kind of go into that, like whether or not students really read or focus. So I'm excited for next week's passage too.
I like it. All right. So what do we have in store for us today?
This week, we're going to also kind of look at a passage that depends on interpretation. All these passages depend on interpretation, how the author sees things, how the author views different problems and issues and concerns. In this case, it's all about definitions. How does the author define something? That's another way that we can look at interpretation. How does the author view this or view that? And believe it or not, a lot of students don't realize this, but definitions are not necessarily consistent. My definition of something may be totally different than your definition. It's really based on our experience, right? With the definition, with the word, how we've seen the word used in different contexts. So there's a lot that can be said about this, and I'm excited for this passage because it'll show us how sometimes definitions are not the same, right? And sometimes we define things in a different way.
Yeah. All right. Let's go ahead and jump in. Again, if you want to follow along, swipe on your podcast app of choice that you're listening to this, or if you're on the website, obviously the article and everything will be there as well. All right, we have our first paragraph. When a few years ago, I decided to write a book about charm, I began asking friends and acquaintances if they could name 5 people in contemporary public life, in show business, television, journalism, politics, sports. They thought charming. All right, so first sentence, and I'm already lost. The start of the sentence even throws me off. When a few years ago, I decided to write a book about charm. It's just like, I don't see sentences start off that way normally. And so I'm like, I don't know what I'm reading. And so I'm kind of confused what they're talking about already.
Okay, well, let's take it slow, right? The author is talking about charm, right? Do we know that? Are we comfortable with
the author wanted to write a book about charm a few years ago.
Are we okay with, as long as we know that,
okay,
then we know we're talking about charm.
Okay.
Right? And then the author started asking friends and acquaintances if they could name 5 people, right, in public life, in show business, television, politics, etc., what they thought about, charm, right? What is charming, right? So that's, as long as we know it's really thinking about and talking about charming, then we're going to be fine.
Okay.
But in some ways, the author is kind of asking their friend or his or her friend about charm. What is charm? Who represents charm, or what? How do you view these people? Or do you view them as charm or not charm? Right? We don't need to know exactly. The grammar here is kind of off. It's not perfect, but we do know it's about charm, and that's what we care about the most.
Okay. None could do it. So I guess saying I asked friends and acquaintances if they could name 5 people, nobody could. Some couldn't name one. again, just people couldn't name, I guess, charming.
Right. Well, they couldn't name people that were charming.
People that were
right?
charming. Yep.
Right. Okay.
Many of the names that did come up seemed equally or easily disqualified. So it sounds like the author is saying they named some people, but they weren't charming.
Okay.
Someone mentioned Tom Hanks. Okay, so one name that popped up. Nice enough as far as one knows, but charming, no.
Okay, I'm going to stop you right there. So as I'm reading this, I'm actually thinking to myself, is Tom Hanks charming? Right? It doesn't hurt to actually think about what the author's trying to say, right? Instead of always trying to understand it, play with it, right? Experience it. I think a lot of students take this way too seriously. Enjoy what you're reading, right? Enjoy this opportunity where the author is just talking to you about something that is unique, right? And never been discussed probably by any of your friends, right?
Yeah.
I don't think anyone goes up to other friends and go, "Hey, is Tom Brady charming?" Or is LeBron James charming? Like these are not things that we necessarily talk about, but hey, we're posed with this question on what charming is or who is charming, and we can play with it.
Okay. So picture yourself having drinks with Tom Hanks and how he's charming you or not.
Or not, right?
Or
And
not,
apparently he's not charming.
Apparently to the author, he's not charming. And I don't know. He's an actor. I don't know him personally. I just know how he acts. So,
Right.
All right. Another mentioned Oprah. So another name thrown out there. Immensely famous. Perhaps the most famous person in the country. But charming? I don't think so. So again, the author is disqualifying this other person, Oprah, saying, nope, famous, but not charming. The same few names kept sputtering out. Steve Martin, Lady Gaga, Bill Murray, Meryl Streep, Paul McCartney, talented people, all but scarcely charming. All right, so lots of names here, and according to the author, nobody is charming.
Okay, sounds good. So, I mean, it seems like none of these people should be deemed charming, right? Maybe there are people that are charming, but at least not these people. Right?
And what's interesting is at the beginning, they say show business, television journalism, politics, sports, and all the people that are mentioned are like entertainers, actors, and musicians.
Yes, exactly. You don't need to know who Steve Martin, Lady Gaga are, right? Meryl Streep. But you should know that they're probably discussing some kind of contemporary entertainment, right? So politics, sports, etc., like you said.
Okay. Paragraph 2. If I had asked the same question 50 or 60 years ago, the names would have come cascading out. Cary Grant, Katharine Hepburn, Ronald Colman, Myrna Loy, Jack Benny, William Powell, Barbara Stanwyck, Yogi Berra, and on into the night. All people about whose charm one could be assured to get an immediate consensus. So it sounds like the author is kind of pitting old world entertainment versus contemporary entertainment, saying, look, all of these people used to be charming or were charming back in their day, and there was a consensus, so everybody thought that, but now not so much.
Well, yeah, exactly. So back then, they were charming. At least today, they're not, right?
Yeah.
At least from what we see. Great. Okay.
What during the intervening years has happened to, in effect, all but put charm out of business in our time? So the author is setting up a question. What has happened that nobody is charming anymore, or at least these people in contemporary public life?
Right. This makes it easier to understand the point the author is trying to make. Why are people not charming? Right. So the author has established this. This is something that the author believes. That's why the author is questioning why it's the case. So it is happening. This is what's going on. We should know this, right? But why is not so clear yet.
Yeah. So a potential question I see coming out of this is what are the thoughts of, what are the author's thoughts on contemporary public life? And there's something about how they're not charming anymore, even though it doesn't specifically say, it just says the author is saying, hey, what happened to put charm out of business? So we know that the author is saying it's not there anymore.
Exactly. The author didn't make it that clear. The only thing the author said was these people are not charming, right? But by saying, look, it's out of business in our time, that's pretty explicitly saying we don't have charm anymore, right? And so they'll ask questions about that, right?
Okay. Paragraph 3. When I batted down some of these candidates for the Golden Circle, a discussion of the definition of charm often followed. And so the author is saying, hey, let's talk about what we define as charm.
Right. So, but the thing is, that first clause, when I batted down some of these candidates for the golden circle, what the heck is batted down and what the heck is the golden circle?
Mm-hmm.
Right. Most students are completely lost by that. You got to think about what we've been talking about. We've been talking about two groups: the groups that are charming, the groups that are not charming, right? Earlier, they're charming, later, they're not charming. So by batting down, that's basically saying I'm putting it down, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm really not going to consider these things as important or as relevant, right? So what did the author bat down? Tom Hanks, right? Lady Gaga, Bill Murray. So these people, these candidates were batted down for the golden circle. The golden circle, apparently golden is some kind of charm. So, it seems like the author is describing charm in a positive way, trying to associate it to some kind of group of people that are golden in society. So that's how we should be interpreting this. Now, if you don't understand that when you read it, that's because you're not really keeping track of what was being discussed before,
Mm-hmm.
right? So you just need to become more aware of what we're discussing before and how this relates. And a lot of students go, okay, well, I don't have to worry about this. It's true. We probably don't have to worry about this, but it definitely helps gain confidence, right? It gives you confidence on what you're reading and allows you to understand it better. So I challenge students to stop after sentences they don't really understand when they review. Think about why it was discussed. Does this relate to what I just read? And this goes back to the puzzle, right? How does this fit in with the puzzle that we discussed last week, right? So in this case, how does this relate? Well, golden circle is probably this other group of people, right? Okay. And yes, a discussion of charm followed. So all we really need to know, the key, if you want to get a good score, if you want to get like a 129, 130, you just need to know that we're talking about charm, right?
Right.
What is charm? Okay, go ahead.
A surprising number of the people I talked with conflated charm with charisma, which was in quotes here, though their definitions of that vogue word generally turned out to be far from clear. So the author is saying when trying to figure out the definition of charm, he would talk to these people and they would confuse it with charisma in quotes. And I think he's putting it in quotes because the next part he says that even charisma, they really didn't know what that meant.
Exactly. It's not clear, right? It's that vogue word, right? So apparently it's not the clearest word to define charm with.
Mhm.
Okay, so let's go ahead.
Charisma is one of those words that most people use to mean whatever they want it to mean. So again, why it turned out to be far from clear is everybody's using it differently. And then in parentheses here, when I use a word, says Humpty Dumpty in Through the Looking Glass, it means just what I choose it to mean, neither more nor less. So he's quoting a piece of art here saying that the definition according to Humpty Dumpty is whatever he wants it to mean.
Okay.
For the people at Avon, charisma is the name of a perfume. So giving an example of charisma to a company, Avon. It is the first name of an actress in a television series about vampires. Another definition, a name. What charisma really means, as set out by the German social scientist Max Weber, is authority, quote, resting on devotion to the exceptional sanctity, heroism, or exemplary character of an individual, end quote, that shows up not in pleasing conversation, but on the world stage. So then we have a definition from a German social scientist, Max Weber.
Okay, what is that definition? We should know it.
Resting on devotion to the exceptional sanctity, heroism, or exemplary character of an individual.
Right. So how can you kind of like summarize that into one word? I'm thinking some kind of heroic acts, right? Heroism is pretty much the key word here,
Mm-hmm.
right? Sanctity, exemplary character. I mean, those are things of that like are honorable, right? So honor, heroism, that's what I'm thinking of here.
Yeah, and that heroism is probably one that most people will know and will easily hold on to.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly.
Okay.
Okay. So what is the definition of charisma in this case?
Heroism.
Right. And that's based off of Weber, right? So we should know that, hey, if they ask what is charisma based on what Weber thinks, it's based on honor or heroism. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Jesus had charisma. So too did Napoleon, Gandhi, and a very few others, not including Charlie Chaplin, Buster Keaton, or Laurel and Hardy, who each in his own way had great charm, but no charisma whatsoever. So comparing a couple people who had charisma to some who did not, based on the previous definition.
Right. And what did these people have that was not charisma?
Charm.
So it's a very subtle way of saying, look, charisma is defined as this, and they don't have charm, right? Or they do have charm, but they don't have charisma.
Mm-hmm.
So in a way, it's trying to say that charm is not the same as charisma, because look, charisma is defined as this, and here are some people who have charisma, but then, these are other people who have great charm, but no charisma, right? So that's, again, trying to show us that, look, they're different in some way.
Yeah. Okay. Paragraph 4. Some people I talked with thought charm was synonymous with, quote, cool. So again, just other people's thoughts about what charm was.
Right. So again, we're trying to define charm. First, we try to define charm in terms of charisma. We define charisma, but it's not charm. Now we're talking about charm in terms of cool. So again, this definition is very fluid. We don't know what the definition is. The author hasn't really established a definition of charm just yet, right? And that's making me itch. Like, what is the definition of charm? What the heck is charm, right? I've heard, I always thought about that too. Like, what is that word mean, right? So let's go ahead, keep reading.
In fact, the two, charm and cool, are all but opposed. So the author is saying, look, these two are different as well.
Right. All but opposed is kind of tough to understand. If you don't understand that, keep reading. Hopefully, it'll clear it up. Go ahead.
Cool aims for detachment, distance. Charm is social, bordering on the intimate. So just setting up the two as different.
Yes. Okay. And believe it or not, hey, look, this is what charm is. It's intimate, right? I like that. It's social. Okay, now I know. Now I get what charm is based on what the author is saying. A good question that they'll ask is, hey, which of the following is charm, right? And you have to pick something that is intimate and social, right? They'll give you different scenarios. It's going to be like an analogy question and say, oh, based on how the author perceives charm, which of the following would the author agree with, or which one is most analogous to it? And they'll give you some kind of answer like a mother caring for or nursing their children, right? Or their child. And then they'll give you another one where they'll say something like, I don't know, something that seems to be charming, but isn't really charming as the author defines it. So maybe something like a really great actor who, like doesn't look at the audience, or something like that, right? And you have to know charm is intimate, something that is social, right? So you're looking for something that is connected, and that's what you're going to go for.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Cool is icy, charm, warm. So again, more contrasting there. Cool is costive, charm, often ebullient. And so those two words, I think, would throw people off. I don't know costive and ebullient. I don't know what those words mean, but I think I would just try to keep going and see if maybe it tells us.
Well, what do you think it means based on everything else we've read?
I have no idea.
Well, think about it. Like, what did we define as cool? What was cool before?
Well, detachment, distance, and icy.
Probably that's what it means, right? That's probably what costive is referring to in some capacity. Now, it's not exact, but costive is probably along the same lines.
Yeah.
Right. So maybe it's not it's kind of slow. It's kind of sounds like costly, but it's not exactly costly. So it's a word that kind of goes with cool, I would say. Yep. Now, what about ebullient? Now, you might not know exactly what that word means, but what have we defined as charm so far?
We defined it as social, intimate, and warm.
So maybe something to do with that, right? Ebullient is kind of referring to enthusiasm. Again, we don't really have to worry about it, but yeah, we know the big picture here. Okay, go ahead.
Cool doesn't require approval. Charm hopes to win it. So again, more kind of definitions there. Mm-hmm. Cool began life in jazz under the great saxophonist Lester Young, who first used the term, but it soon descended to the argot of drugs. So they give us a name here where cool began from a saxophonist, and then it descended to the argot of drugs. I wouldn't know what that means. Argative drugs.
Probably, it says descended to drugs, so
Mhm.
it has something to do with drugs, right?
Yeah.
So probably terminologies for drugs. I'm thinking like, different nicknames they have for drugs these days. You know what I mean? But okay, go ahead.
Okay. Cool gave way to hip and hep. So just telling us where cool is going or where it's been.
Okay.
In Dave Frischberg's song, I'm Hip, the singer proclaims that he watches arty French flicks with his shades on and is so hip, I call my girlfriend man. So, all right.
That's so funny.
Yeah.
All right.
So they give us a name and talks about a song that this guy sang.
Okay.
Miles Davis was cool. Louis Armstrong, charming. So they gave us a couple names here, just like the previous paragraph of who is cool versus charming. The previous paragraph was charismatic versus charming. And so, yeah. So now I think this paragraph is just similar to the last one, saying cool and charm are not the same.
That's it. That's really all it is. I mean, we don't need to know exactly what the heck these these quotes are saying, right? They're lyrics probably from a song or whatever. But we know that charm and cool are defined in different ways, and they give us those definitions.
Mm-hmm.
We're responsible for that. We're always responsible for definitions. Now, a good question I always get is, what if they ask me about charm? Is that something I have to go back to in a particular paragraph? If they define it, yes. If they define it, absolutely. If it's in one paragraph, right? If it's something that they refer to in one paragraph. But if they don't, then I question whether you really need to go back. Right? You probably don't need to go back. It's probably based on the bigger picture of the whole passage.
Mm-hmm.
So it just depends on how the author defines this, right? If they define things, then we should probably go back. If they don't define it, we probably don't need to go back.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Moving on to the next paragraph. Nor is charm the same as style. And now by the time I read this, I'm like, oh, great. It's a whole nother paragraph that says charm is not the same as style. And in my mind, I would go, I'm going to skip reading this because I think all that it's going to tell me is charm is not the same as style.
But that's the key here. That's the key. You know the big picture. So it's going to make it so much easier to read the rest of this paragraph. I wouldn't skip it. I would never skim a paragraph. But I would keep that in mind. Hey, okay, we're probably still talking about how charm is not style. And I'm going to read this stuff, but I'm not going to read too much into it, right? I'm going to just stick to that idea. Okay, charm is not style. All right, go ahead.
All right. Many charming people have distinctive styles, but there's no one style that marks the charming. So the author is saying, look, there are charming people who have lots of different styles, but there's not one style that says, ooh, that's charming.
Okay.
Style, V.S. Naipaul thought, was ultimately a way of looking at the world, which suggests the immense variety of available styles: dark, complex, cheerful. So the author's saying, look, there's one guy here who says we look at style as a way to look at the world, and there's lots of different ways to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Some styles are, of course, more winning, richer, grander, more interesting than others, and to the extent that they are so, the more likely they are to contribute to a person's charm. That was interesting. So, depending on the style, like richer, grander, etc., they may contribute to charm.
Yeah, so maybe style can help charm in some ways, right? But we shouldn't lose track of the big picture, right? This is the kind of sentence that throws students off. But wait, didn't they say charm helps style or style helps charm?
Yeah, that's different than the other paragraphs that we've read.
Yeah, well, I mean, it might be bringing in something to kind of seem more reasonable. Like, oh, well, maybe this is something that could be associated with charm, right? But we can't take it too seriously. We have to know what to take seriously and what not to take seriously. And that's based on experience. When you read passages in certain ways and you notice certain things, you're going to be more aware of what is important, what's not important. That's kind of where the course goes into. But yeah, go ahead. Keep going.
Okay. Some styles are charming. Some charm is stylish. Nevertheless, the two remain distinct. All right, so I read two sentences there, which I shouldn't do, but I did. So again, just comparing, contrasting, saying, look, style is not charm, charm is not style.
That's it. Great. That's the big picture. So
Wow.
what do we need to know about this paragraph? What does the author think here
So
about this passage?
this whole
Excuse me.
passage,
Yeah.
that, oh man, that charm is something of the past, and we've lost it.
That was mentioned, right? But I think it's more about the definition of charm,
Mm.
right? What does the author interpret as charm? Charm is not defined as style. It's not defined as charisma. Charm is charm, right? It's different from cool. It's different. It's not, there's a unique identity to charm, and the author defines it as intimate and warm, etc., and social. So these are the words that we should keep track of because the author is really caring about the defining charm. Now, yeah, should you know that charm doesn't exist anymore? Maybe, but that's too deep. If a student is thinking, okay, well, we're not too charming anymore, right? Then you're losing track of the big picture because that's only mentioned to kind of bring in or introduce how we don't really define charm. We don't know the definition of charm, right? That was used to bring up this problem that we have with the definition of charm. How we don't really know how it's defined.
Okay.
Yeah. So again, focus on how the author defines charm. You may know charming as something totally different, right? I mean, who knows how you used the word in the past? But we now know what the author thinks of charm and what the author thinks of cool, and we are responsible for that. The MCAT will test us based on those things. So great.
All right, so there you have it. Now you know that charm is not the same as charisma, and it's not the same as being cool, and it's not the same as style. Although style can help you add to charm, which is kind of cool, but it's not charm. Anyway, I hope this passage was helpful for you. Have a little fun at the end trying to work through all of those definitions. But as Jack talked about in this episode, you have to know the definitions. You have to know the definitions. If the passage is trying to help you define something, you have to remember those definitions. If you want some more MCAT prep, some more MCAT support, some more MCAT CARS support specifically, go to jackwestin.com. Check out his free, that's right, free CARS daily passages. Now, a lot of students will say they're really hard. They're not like the real thing. And the same student who said that they're really hard and not like the real thing scored a 131 or 132 on the exam. So I'm like, well, they're preparing you in some way or another. So I think you should check them out. And even if they're really hard, you need to do them. Don't expect to improve if you're not doing something that's hard, right? You go to the gym and you lift heavier and heavier weights. That's how you get stronger. You don't improve on the MCAT CARS by doing passages that are as easy as possible that you're going to get all of the questions right. You do get better by doing passages that are harder and harder and harder. And so sign up for free CARS daily passages from Jack Westin at jackwestin.com. Hope you have a great week. We'll see you next time here on the MCAT CARS podcast.